How evil is McKinsey? This is the core question addressed in the brand new book, When McKinsey Comes to Town, the hidden influence of the world's most powerful consulting firm, which sparks new discussions on whether or not McKinsey is a significant source of evil in our world. Jack, you are a former McKinsey consultant yourself. Don't you think your outfit looks a bit ridiculous? And you, do you think your costume makes you look any better? Back to the book, which has been written by two top New York Times journalists, Walt Bogdanich and Michael Forsyth. On almost 300 pages, they deliver a devastating report on the wrongdoings of the world's leading management consulting firm, McKinsey & Company, with which I spent 5 years myself as a consultant and project manager. In this video, I offer my personal book review with 3 main sections: my brief summary of the book, my personal evaluation of this book's approach, and my personal reflections on some aspects of McKinsey work as described in the book. I've also shared a review on this book in writing on Amazon. If you'd like to read my written review of the actual book, find the links below in the video description. Summary of the book. The book is separated into 15 chapters, and in each of them the authors address a different business sector or country that McKinsey has been serving and, according to the authors, has sooner or later messed up. Even though I'm dressed up in this fun Halloween-themed costume, make no mistake, this is a de-stressing read. Let me share with you my personal Hall of Shame with the 5 worst accounts of McKinsey activity given in this book. First, maybe the most well-known scandal, McKinsey provided strategy advice to American pharma company Purdue Pharma on how to sell more of its OxyContin drug, a painkiller and opioid that is highly addictive and has so far killed at least 750,000 Americans. Second, McKinsey continued to help international tobacco companies such as Philip Morris and British American Tobacco to sell more cigarettes and preserve a positive image even at times when the health damage caused by cigarettes had already been widely understood. McKinsey also at least indirectly helped e-cigarette manufacturer Juul, known for its nicotine vaping devices, to research the popularity of different fruity flavors among the youth. And the book claims that even McKinsey's current managing partner or CEO gave at least his name as the McKinsey Director of Client Services to Juul. Third, the book lays out how McKinsey developed strategies for American insurance company Allstate on how to pay out fewer and lower claims to its customers, namely by systematically involving certain shares of its customer base in time-consuming lawsuits and exploiting poor education or poverty of some of its claimants. In this context, the authors refer to a McKinsey slide featuring an alligator insinuating that Allstate should just sit and wait for its victims, the claimant, to give up. Fourth, in around half of the book's chapters, McKinsey's work for governments and state-owned companies is heavily criticized. Either the authors find that McKinsey, to say it in mild terms, was highly uncritical of its work for undemocratic regimes around the world, or that it carried significant conflicts of interest when executing work simultaneously for regulatory bodies as well as companies affected by their regulation. Fifth, the authors blame McKinsey for hypocrisy, when on the one hand it likens itself to a torchbearer in the fight against climate change, but on the other hand continues to serve the world's largest polluters of greenhouse gases. The book states that since 2010, McKinsey had worked for at least 43 of those 100 companies that have emitted the most CO2 since 1965, with the number 3 on that list, American oil and gas producer Chevron, paying $50 million in consulting fees to McKinsey in 2019 alone. Whoa, it's a lot to bear, and I've just given you the peaks of the icebergs. Read for yourself. Now let me tell you what I think about this book, but don't forget to like and subscribe. Evaluation of this book's approach. First, I think all reported accounts have been meticulously researched by the authors, who list their sources on more than 30 pages at the end of the book. They claim they have interviewed almost 100 current and former McKinsey employees, spoiler, they did not approach me, which is remarkable given McKinsey in general is one of the most secretive organizations in this world. I must say that whenever the book discussed McKinsey internal processes and communications, I always felt this seems authentic, judged by my own experience, and so it might be true. More general, while McKinsey is usually singled out as more or less the single culprit for maldevelopment, the authors do a fantastic job of telling the history of how various business sectors have evolved and changed over the past, starting sometimes from 100 years ago. At one point in the book, it quotes a McKinsey consultant with the ironic words, "To those convinced that a secretive cabal controls the world, the usual suspects are Illuminati, lizard people, or globalists. They are wrong, naturally. There is no secret society shaping every major decision and determining the direction of human history. There is, however, McKinsey & Company." If you like to understand how McKinsey strategically builds its influence and acquires new clients, the book makes a very interesting read too. As a former McKinsey consultant who actually believes his work has done more good than harm, it is a painful read, and I sometimes wished the book was at least sometimes less lopsided towards the evil side of business. If we say that this was the distribution of McKinsey projects, with the most evil projects on the left-hand side and the ones for the best causes on the right-hand side, then I feel the book entirely focuses on these maybe bottom 2 to 5% of projects, though of course I do not know the exact number. McKinsey does hundreds, if not thousands of projects every year. And to be honest, the great majority of projects are some average boring efficiency improvement projects for some common industrial equipment manufacturing companies. On the other side of the spectrum, there also is a small share of projects that undeniably serve a good cause. And I can testify this, because I personally worked on one of them, a project investigating options to reduce plastics waste entries into our oceans. I also felt that the book sometimes almost mocks McKinsey for its continuous ability to attract the most talented graduates from the top universities of this world, and that it underplays McKinsey's further strengths. The book seems to repeatedly insinuate that McKinsey was just a cost cutter. During my time at McKinsey, I've managed to avoid almost entirely to work on cost-cutting projects and instead managed to go on engagements on the bright side of consulting life, revenue growth. Nevertheless, knowing how to cut costs and turn around the business in crisis is a key skill to a company's survival. I do believe that McKinsey's approach in reconciling rigorous analytics with creativity is unique. Not only because I hold a PhD on climate change economics myself, I found the chapter on whether McKinsey was a force for good or evil in combating climate change most captivating. While in many chapters the authors aim to pull McKinsey into pieces, in this and a few other chapters they admit some shades of grey. The chapter explains how young talent is attracted by the McKinsey brand and intellectualism, as well as its company values and self-understanding to be a force for good, which occasionally can spark intergenerational conflicts of interest within the firm. For instance, the book quotes an internal McKinsey survey in which 369 out of 465 participants named climate change and carbon emissions as the top priority issue for the firm, while only 79 picked compensation and benefits, which can make you hopeful. Some brave McKinsey consultants came forward to challenge their senior leaders on how McKinsey could reconcile its pledge to combat global warming with its continuous work for some of the world's dirtiest polluters, which McKinsey internal debate eventually culminates in a global conference call in which, amongst other senior partners, the current and former managing partners of McKinsey state they could not help change the major greenhouse gas polluters if it chose to abandon them. A fascinating read. My personal reflections. Let me wrap this up with a few further reflections from my own side, which I think you should expect on my UN Consulting YouTube channel. Is McKinsey the cause of all evil? I think probably not. In short, McKinsey is a mercenary serving those asking for its service. In other videos, I've jokingly dubbed McKinsey as the highest servant of capitalism. Note a servant and maybe a catalyst, but not the creator of it. At their best and their worst, McKinsey reflects where our market economies currently stand. Have no doubt that McKinsey would love to do a greater share of green and sustainability work, but unfortunately our economies are still designed in a way that most market actors are incentivized to increase their profits, but not to save the environment. Now I think you may still criticize McKinsey's overrated potential. It manages to attract so many young and good-hearted talents that it could do even more to be both an anonymous voice as well as an actor for good. Upon joining the firm, in my first year I wrote a little manifesto in which I laid out how McKinsey could and should become a more political organization, for instance by holding internal votes among employees on what sort of work to accept and what to reject. Undoubtedly though, while this could make McKinsey a more credible actor, such a strategy would, at least in the short term, entail the risk of McKinsey losing some of its dirty business to less moralistic competitors. What the book does very well is to elaborate a number of incidents where McKinsey reacted too slowly, when external circumstances changed and McKinsey's work bore the risk of, at least, becoming highly dubious. In the accounts given by this book, McKinsey usually pulled out from such business far too late. Officially, McKinsey claimed that it intended to remain a force for good for as long as possible, which would be the better choice than leaving just a mess behind. I think the other part of those stories is that McKinsey partners are internally incentivized to cling for as long as possible to super rich cash flow clients, since they are required to sustain their careers in the company and to fund their handsome partner salaries. This is another reason for why sometimes these intergenerational conflicts between young and senior consultants do break out. In regard to the potential conflicts of interest, given that McKinsey very often serves multiple competitors and even regulators from the same sector at the same time, I'm a bit more relaxed, as I can witness that at least at team levels, no exchange on the work accomplished takes place. I cannot rule out such discussions on senior partner level, but if McKinsey did not manage to preserve Chinese walls internally, its credibility in front of its clients would blow up immediately. If you ask me if after reading this book I would still apply to and work for McKinsey, my answer is yes. I would still be curious to explore what McKinsey truly was about and how I could impact it while it would be impacting myself. As I said, the book falls short of giving McKinsey credit for its supreme working standards and methods. In case you do not find a niche within McKinsey that you like, you can still leave it at some point, as most consultants do anyway. But the unmatched skill set that you acquire at McKinsey or another top consulting firm stays with you for life, and you can choose yourself to harness it for the good or bad. If you, for whatever reason, want to learn about how consulting works, this book makes an interesting, sometimes fascinating read, especially if you want to learn about its worst-case scenarios. I've also left a written review on the book on Amazon. If you want to read my review or actually the book, you find the links in the video description below this video. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe and share for further top quality business and consulting career advice. And McKinsey devil, go away! Oh no, an exorcist! McKinsey is gone. Now the world will become a better place.